Today I'm going to show you how to fix up a nasty hole like this. Step one, we need to prepare around the area. I'm just going to do this with a orbital sander. It's got a bit of 40 grit paper on there. We're going to make it nice and rough just around the edges. Brush off any dust and have a look at the hole. So as you can see with this hole, the fiberglass has just been pressed down and cracked. It looks pretty bad, but it's actually quite secure in there. So what I'm going to do today is I'm just going to leave that fiberglass in there and just kind of fill straight over the top of it. But first, I'm going to try and sand these smooth bits in here so I've got something for the filler to stick to. I'm just going to use this old rough piece of paper to sand in there. I kind of try and curl the edges up a little bit. It just helps stop some of the stuff running over the edge onto the rest of the board. So it's good to try and keep this clean and smooth. So for this hole that I've got here, I'm going to mix up about maybe 30 or 40 mils of resin with Q-Cell. So I'm going to tip it into a container. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some wax and styrene. That's probably a bit more, but who cares. Now I'm going to add some Q-Cell. It's just pretty much ground up foam. I'm going to slap a fair bit of that stuff in. Probably about the same amount of Q-Cell to resin. I'm just going to slowly start mixing. So it's getting there, it's a little bit pasty, but I'm going to add a bit more because I want it really thick. Tip a bit more in. Once it's all mixed in, I'll show you what the texture's like. So that's what happens when you mix too quickly. Yeah, that should be thick enough. See how it just slowly blobs off the mixing stick? So now I'm going to put hardener in. I'll probably put 1.5% of hardener, or maybe even 2%. But first I'm going to start clearing my bench off so I've got room to put my board back up here. Now that's about right. Slowly squirt it in. Now give it a good mix. You probably need to mix it for about a minute to get it to penetrate through all the foam and resin. Make sure you get it off all the edges too, because sometimes you can mix it up really well but miss bits on the edge. Then you scrape that into your board and that bit doesn't go off. Then you got like a spongy, soft, soggy bit. Now we're ready to tip some in. Oh, shivers. Lucky I had that tape there. So I'm just going to pour a generous amount in. Kind of push it down as I do it. I'm going to use my mixing stick to poke it in and poke it around just to make sure it penetrates every single little gap in that hole. It's always good to leave a lot extra on there. What I like to do before the filler is fully set is get a paint scraper and just gently scrape the excess filler off the top of the board. So still with the 40 grit paper, I'm going to sand roughly around and across the area to smoothen it off. That's good. Now I'm going to get some solar resin and a bit of cloth and cover the area. So now I'm going to do another piece that's slightly bigger. I'll just cut the dags off from around the edges to make it a little bit more tidier when it's finished. So that's how it's going to be when it's all glued down. What we're going to do here first is we're going to put a layer of resin all across this area. making sure I try and get it in to all the little crevices. Okay, so I'll lay my first sheet of cloth on. I'm going to dab it down. Now I'm going to chuck down the other sheet. I need to make sure it's all fully saturated. Now it's time to take this out into the sun to dry. Okay, our resin and cloth has dried out nicely. It's reasonably flat. And now I'm just going to sand off all the high bits with a bit of 80 grit paper. Try and make it as flat as possible without sanding too much cloth off around the hole. It doesn't feel too bad. You can feel a little bit of a bump. You can definitely see the edges, but once we do the top coat, we'll give it a better sand with lighter paper and it'll cover all that up. I'm still using the same resin that I used on that other patch. That's the good thing about solar resin, is you just chuck it in the shade and it never goes off. So let's paint a consistent layer over this patch. So I've left this out to dry. I'm going to start by sanding off the high bits, then I'm going to give it a good hard sand all over. And what I'm going to do now is put the 240 grit paper on and give it a sand, and it's going to smooth out these edges here. It feels quite flat. You can feel a little bump, but the 240 grit will help fix that. Ooh, it's pretty good. There's just a couple little bits that we can fix. Still nice and hard. So I'm just going to use this little foam block I've made. Bit of 800 grit paper. Bit of spit or water, just to give it a final sand to smoothen it out. Ooh, that feels good. It's another pressure check just to make sure it's nice and consistent and firm. Okay, I'll just wipe this off with a bit of wet rag. And that's the job finished. Thanks for watching this video from the How To video series brought to you by Branch Productions. If you liked it, please subscribe to our channel. If you really liked it, then make a donation. They really help.